Hello, I'm Esther Gitu. It's Wednesday, September 6th. This is Africa 54. African leaders propose new global taxes and reforms to international financial institutions to fund climate change action. The former leader of the far-right Proud Boys is sentenced to 22 years in prison for his involvement in the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. And in our technology report, a Nigerian Digital Products Agency specializes in developing cutting-edge web and software applications to provide top-notch training. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. We begin our broadcast with the Africa Climate Summit, where African leaders on Wednesday proposed new global taxes and reforms to international financial institutions to help fund climate change action in a declaration that will form the basis of their negotiating position at November's COP28 summit. The Nairobi Declaration capped the three-day Africa Climate Summit in Kenya, which was dominated by discussions of how to mobilize financing to adapt to increasingly extreme weather, conserve natural resources, and develop renewable energy. Organizers emphasized market-based solutions such as carbon credits in the lead-up to the summit, and hundreds of millions of dollars of such investments were announced in Nairobi.
As a continent, we have developed our common position, which encapsulates our ambition for socio-economic transformation and our climate action agenda. This position is anchored on the potential that Africa holds to decarbonize the global economy and set the stage for green industrialization throughout the world. We demand a fair playing ground for our countries to access the investment needed to unlock the potential and translate it into opportunities. We further demand a just multilateral development finance architecture to liberate our economies from odious debt and onerous barriers to necessary financial resources.
The final declaration was heaviest on demands that major polluters and global financial institutions commit more resources to help poorer nations and make it easier for them to borrow at affordable rates. For more on the climate summit, here's Mohammed Yusuf from Nairobi.
The Africa Climate Summit has ended in Kenya, with the leaders calling the global community to act with urgency in reducing greenhouse gas emissions, fulfilling its obligations, and to keep financial promises to help fight climate change. African leaders say they are committed to develop and implement policies and regulations aimed at attracting local, regional, and global investment in green growth.
It has been so good. I have attended the site meetings in terms of climate change finance. For example, we have concluded one in an hotel today where vulnerable people and minority peoples who are affected by climate change has been discussed in terms of financing. So we have, there is the global person who is in charge of the funds. He has been telling us on how to access the funds.
I've been participating here since the opening of the summit, and what I've witnessed is a demonstrated effort by the heads of states in Africa, and of course with the global partners, on how they can really have grassroots initiatives in the fight against climate change. And there were also commitments in terms of climate financing, concessionary financing, and what also came out is that the non-state actors are also willing to partner with the governments to see that there is participation of the people at the grassroots level.
Discussions around energy transitions to renewable energy sources. So I think all of that is giving up hope that Africans can actually solve our problems with our own resources, with our own human capacity. So I think there's hope for Africans.
Africa will focus on climate-positive economic development plans such as expansion of just energy transitions and renewable energy generation for industrial activity, climate-aware and restorative agricultural practices, and the critical protection and enhancement of nature and biodiversity. The three-day summit has ended, but Africa Climate Week continues until Friday. Mohammed Yusuf for VOA News, Nairobi, Kenya.
For more perspective on the Africa Climate Summit, I'm joined from Nairobi by Jackson Kinyanjui Koimbori, an agriculture and climate change scientist. Mr. Koimbori, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, the Africa Climate Summit has concluded and major issues have been tabled. What immediate action does Africa need to take to tackle the effects of climate change?
Thank you so much for that question. And I would like to mention 5 things that were raised, of which are of major concern, which were raised at the Africa Climate Summit. The first one is on global emission reduction. So at the summit, there were raised issues in terms of global emissions, in that we need to reduce our carbon emissions by as much as 45% in this decade, so that we can reach 1.5 degrees limited degrees, that is a global temperature increase, as it was raised in the Paris Agreement. Also, they called for the climate finance, whereby they were raising the issues of we need to see commitment within the green climate finance, whereby $100 billion pledge, which was put forth 14 years ago, which has not been coming into fruition. The other one is the issue of phasing out coal and fossil fuel. And this is something that we are calling for, so as we can be able to curtail the rising global surface temperatures. And last but not least was the issue of climate positive investments. We are hoping to see Africa getting climate positive investments, which can be able to catalyze the green growth and inclusive economies.
So, Jackson, as a climate scientist, what would be your #1 proposal to the leaders of Kenya to tackle the climate damage that has already taken place in the East African country?
Thank you so much. And one of the main issues that were raised, and maybe before I come into what I would like to propose, is that the summit called for at least 5 drastic measures to curtail the issues of climate change. The first one being the issue of loss and damage. We are hoping to see the operationalization of loss and damage kitty, which was raised in COP27, to come into effect. Also, we saw one of the recommendations proposals into the carbon taxation, whereby the African Summit and the leaders are calling for a price tag to be put on fossil fuel emissions, so that it can be able to disincentivize the use and promote the switch to green renewable energy. And last but not least, also, they were calling for the ability of Africa to be given more money, so that they can be able to shift into the green renewable energy space, putting into perspective that 600 million people in Africa lack access to electricity, and 970 million Africans lack access to clean cooking. So this is a clarion call, so that we can be able to be given more investment to encourage Africa to move towards a green renewable energy space.
Jackson, very quickly, how much do you think the continent of Africa can achieve in reversing the damage done to the continent before the COP28 summit begins in November?
Thank you so much. And before we head into the COP28 summit in United Arab Emirates, the Africa Climate Summit has set out ambitions and goals. And one of these ambitions it has set out is that we are hoping to get more financial support and to get more policies which can be able to help Africa in scaling its effort towards the green renewable energy space. At the moment, Africa is emitting the lowest in terms of greenhouse gases emissions, but we are suffering the most when it comes to issues of loss and damage. So in reality, what we're hoping for is COP28 will move from promises, will move from having all these boardroom meetings, and actually having real-time adaptation and real-time actions being set out. People in Africa are dying, animals are dying, people are dying due to hunger, and so many other things. So the more we talk, the more we expect more people to die as the boardroom talks are taking place. So what we're calling for is actions as opposed to having all these boardroom talks.
Jackson, very well put. Thank you very much for your insight. Jackson Kinyanjui Koimbori is an agriculture and climate change scientist. Climate change scholars gathered recently at the University of Southern California's Annenberg building here in Washington for a first-of-its-kind forum designed to engage experts from both the United States and Africa. VOA's Anthony Labruto has more.
The U.S.-Africa Initiative Forum's objective is to bring African and U.S. scholars together to solve the most pressing global issues. Climate change topped that list, with a focus on those most affected. Adam Clayton Powell III is the program's director. He believes that bridging the U.S. and Africa is key to solving these issues.
We have a network of experts, of corporate leaders, of educators, of civil society that is growing. We only began this year, and we already have grown far more than we ever expected.
Primrose Karasha, a climate policy writer and international lawyer, believes that Western countries, like the United States, must do more in acknowledging where the resources they use to create green energy come from.
Is energy available? Is it available to be distributed? If not, clearly you have a hurdle that you have to overcome, that you have to jump to convince the people that just energy transition is a priority, whilst at the same time trying to make them understand that what you're facing is not any other drought, is not any other flood like you first faced in the early 90s or 80s when I was growing up.
Charles Ray, a former United States ambassador to Zimbabwe, echoes those same sentiments.
But we need to be more forthcoming with other countries when we're talking to them. We need to probably do more listening than talking, acknowledge the faults that we have, and then as we are trying to work on correcting our own faults, work with them by doing a lot of listening to what they think they need to help them correct their problems.
Ray says developed countries should not impose climate solutions on Africa. The Africa's Future Forum series is continuing to host scholars and policymakers for their monthly meetings throughout the rest of this year. Anthony Labruto, VOA News, Washington.
Nigeria's Presidential Election Tribunal is expected to rule Wednesday on whether Bola Tinubu should remain as president after two rivals challenged his victory in February's disputed vote. There have been numerous legal challenges to the outcome of previous Nigerian presidential elections, but none have succeeded. Atiku Abubakar of the People's Democratic Party and Labour Party's Peter Obi had asked the court to invalidate the election, alleging irregularities, and accused the electoral body of breaching the law by failing to use electronic machines to upload polling station results. France has started talks with some Niger army officials who over withdrawing some troops from the country following a coup in July, according to the French newspaper Le Monde. Tens of thousands of protesters gathered recently outside a French military base in Niamey, demanding that the French troops leave. Abdul Razak Idrissa spoke to people on the streets of Niamey to get their thoughts on the situation.
The Nigerian people love the French people, but it is Mr. Macron's policy that's not working. He has to understand, he was told to leave Niger. The French soldiers must simply leave Niger. The French ambassador must simply leave Niger. That's it. We speak to him in easy French so that he understands. We are fed up. The Niger of 2023 is different from the Niger of the 70s and 60s.
Niger wants its sovereignty. We can't accept that there are foreign forces in our country, whether in the air or on the ground. De Gaulle had expressed the same thing. He says that the sky, the earth, and the sea must return to France. So the Nigerian land and sky must return entirely to Niger without any foreign forces. So if de Gaulle preferred the French today, the Nigerian people and the Nigerian soldiers will liberate Niger, whatever the price.
We gather here today to show our full support for the country and also to send a message to the whole world that Niger needs stability and peace. We don't need wars and conflicts. Niger is a poor country, but it is rich in natural resources that are plundered to abroad since 60 years. So we have another message, especially to the CDO. They are preparing to attack Niger instead of help. They are preparing to attack Niger. It's a shame. Over the years, Nigerian citizens are being slaughtered on the border in Tilia and Tilaberi and elsewhere. Why have we never seen any intervention or any reaction from the CDO?
Pope Francis on Wednesday offered prayers for victims of a fire in South Africa that killed at least 76 people. The pontiff's condolences came after a fire engulfed a 5-story apartment building in Johannesburg on August 31st.
It was with deep sorrow that I learned of the fire that broke out in a 5-story building in the center of Johannesburg in South Africa, in which more than 70 people died, including several children. I invite you to join me in praying for the victims. To the family members, I express my deep condolences, and I send a special blessing for them and for those who are working to provide assistance and support.
The building is linked to South Africa's apartheid era, as it was where Black South Africans collected their documents that would enable them to work in white-owned areas of Johannesburg. Still to come, a report on Nigeria's skyrocketing demand for digital skills. We'll be right back.
On the next Straight Talk Africa, we are focusing on the best and the brightest young Africans who are striving to make a difference in the world. Meet the Yali Fellows of 2023 in a special edition of Straight Talk Africa with Heidi Adams and her co-host, Roger Muntu.
Niger, Burkina Faso, Sudan, Guinea-Bissau, Chad, Mali, and just recently, Gabon. These countries have all recently experienced military coups. The military leaders say they staged the coups to stop corruption, deteriorating security, bad leadership, and among other reasons. On this week's episode of Our Voices, we ask the questions, what are the women's voices on the matter? And what do they propose as the best way forward? Join the conversation each week right here on Our Voices.
In other news, the military junta in Guinea is celebrating 2 years in power, but the opposition and pressure groups are calling for protests because the junta is banning all opposition demonstrations. On Monday and Tuesday, security forces and angry youths in opposition strongholds fought running battles in the capital, Conakry. Britain says it will declare Russia's Wagner mercenary group a banned terrorist organization. Officials say the group remains a threat to global security even after the death of leader Yevgeny Prigozhin. The government says an order will be introduced in Parliament Wednesday to prohibit the group under the Terrorism Act. And the United Nations is releasing $125 million from its emergency relief fund to boost underfunded humanitarian operations. Burkina Faso is set to get $9 million. Mali will get $8 million, $6.5 million to both the Central African Republic and Mozambique, $6 million to Cameroon, and $4 million to Malawi. An attorney for Enrique Tarrio, former head of the far-right Proud Boys, says he was caught off guard when the judge sentenced his client on Tuesday to 22 years in prison for his involvement in the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. It is the longest penalty imposed so far for the deadly riot.
But of course, it all caught us a little bit off guard, where the sentence was imposed in the manner it was imposed, as far as a sentence of 22 years. Being one that was run consecutive to another. But yeah, that's what the appellate process is for, right? So that's why we're here. That's what we anticipate is going to go forward from this point on.
Although Tarrio was not at the Capitol during the bloody melee, prosecutors say he was the architect or primary organizer of the plot directing the attack from outside Washington and later boasting about it. U.S. President Joe Biden is in India this week, joining leaders from the group of 20 leading rich and developing nations to discuss issues such as climate change, debt restructuring, the war in Ukraine, and welcoming new members. VOA's Anita Powell has more from the White House.
President Joe Biden heads to the G20 summit in India with big goals and high hopes that the group of 20 leading rich and developing nations can work together, the White House says.
We hope this G20 summit will show that the world's major economies can work together even in challenging times. So as we head into New Delhi, our focus is going to be on delivering for developing countries, making progress on key priorities for the American people, from climate to technology, and showing our commitment to the G20 as a forum that can actually, as I said before, deliver.
The gathering in India's capital, New Delhi, will be dominated by issues that 24 delegations don't always agree on, such as the war in Ukraine, climate change, a push to reform multilateral institutions that provide financing to developing nations, and the likely decision to welcome the 55-member African Union into the body. Analysts say the absence of two key leaders, Russia's President Vladimir Putin and China's President Xi Jinping, will impact proceedings.
But I think it's good news that Putin yet again has decided to skip the summit, as he did Bali last year. And it even looks like Xi Jinping of China might not show up. That will make it a lot easier for all of the other countries to take action.
As Biden said when asked about Xi's absence from the summit,
I am disappointed, but I'm going to get to see him.
Sullivan on Tuesday did not say when such a meeting might happen. And analysts say they hope that Delhi and Beijing can see past their disagreement over a new Chinese territorial map that India disputes.
The geopolitical tensions were certainly there well before India's G20 year. The fact that they are heightened and that there's a focus on them going into this leaders' summit is not ideal. My hope and expectation would be, again, the framing of this summit on economic issues, that they can manage to put the border dispute in a separate category.
She said she hopes the delegations can see beyond their differences and focus on reforming multilateral institutions like the World Bank, a move analysts say would have wide-ranging effects.
And what those reforms, if they actually go through, would accomplish is putting a greater focus on what we call global public goods. So things like climate, pandemic preparedness, fragility, food insecurity. And the reforms would allow these institutions, including the World Bank, to provide additional financing to both emerging market and low-income countries, and financing at far more preferential terms.
The summit begins Saturday in New Delhi. Anita Powell, VOA News, the White House.
The significance of possessing a digital skill set in today's internet and social media dominated world is more critical than ever for employees and employers. This heightened importance is evident in Nigeria's skyrocketing demand for digital skills. And it's time for a technology report. And joining us now with more is our tech reporter, Paul Ndiho. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Esther. Thank you. A Nigerian Digital Products Agency, IBIS, specializes in developing cutting-edge web and software applications and strives to provide top-notch training. I spoke to Omo Clark, the founder and CEO of IBIS, in Baltimore, Maryland. Welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you for having me.
You are one of the leading tech entrepreneurs in Nigeria. You've been at it for a while. Bring us up to speed. What have you been up to?
We've built several applications for universities. During the COVID, like everybody was locked down, so there was this scramble. So we had a lot of actually tertiary institutions that now wanted to get automated, and they went. So we've built websites, applications, student portals to help people teach online, learn online, register people online, things like that. And we've been building the same for the health sector. So we've got and automated some hospitals, processes, and done stuff like that.
How big is the technology space in Nigeria?
The tech space in Nigeria, like you say, yes, it is vibrant, but fintech in Nigeria is doing okay, financial technology. But the other aspect of it, maybe not as much. So when people talk about technology in Nigeria, mostly they're talking about the fintech space. If you get what I mean. So we have all these other people out there that, when I say there's a 50% gap, so there is that 50% gap. If you look at the stats that come out of Nigeria, they will say 93% of Nigerian businesses are MSMEs, micro, small, medium enterprise, 93%, one-man businesses. All those people, they are not tech-enabled. A lot of them don't know about tech. There's still a huge gap, so a lot of massive training is still needed for businesses. But like Nigeria has a youthful population, as you may know. So the schools need to also ramp up and start ensuring that they include IT, technology training in the curriculum so that people can start learning from a young age.
You said that you still need a lot of training. Most of the people are not up to speed when it comes to how to use this new technology. But then on the flip side, you have a lot of tech giants going to Nigeria looking for talent, saying that Nigeria is the place to be. So I see a bit of contradiction there.
There's a huge gap. I think there were some companies that were training people for specific industries. Even some of those companies, they ran into problems at a point because they needed people with even better skills, I'm in the software industry. A lot of software people in Nigeria that I know, they are building websites, which is fantastic. Everybody needs a website, but it's mostly front-end skills that they are learning. A lot of people are not learning the hardcore back-end coding skills that are required to build like proper systems, So we're still there. As of today, even me being in the software industry, we don't have like a proper Nigerian-made, apart from handijacks, Nigerian-made software built by Nigerians used all over the world. So when you think about it, there's a gap.
There are a lot of companies that have come and within a couple years they wrap up and they're out of business, but you've been able to sustain your business. What is it that you are doing differently?
Expertise in software development. So for me, it's not like I just went and I learned, learned to build websites with WordPress, and I'm going there. I understand the software development process. So some of the areas we have gaps in Nigeria, for example, when you talk about the analysis, when you talk about design, I'm customer first. So I talk to my people, I'm friendly with them, my clients that, try to understand what they want and actually do it. When you test, a lot of people like with proper testing. And one of the things, like, again, if you don't understand software development, when you code, it's difficult to test by yourself what you've coded. You know what I mean? Because you can never see problems in what you've done. So you need a different pair of eyes to come and look at it.
Everybody nowadays is talking about AI, ChatGPT, and anything in between. What are your thoughts on that?
AI can do a lot of good and does do a lot of good. So I think we need to have policies around it so that it's used in a good way.
How do you stay on top of your competition?
Tech keeps changing, so you need to change with tech. You can't be using mainframe when everybody has gone to the cloud, So you need to keep evolving. You need to keep changing, keep understanding, and be out there in industry, in the ecosystem, understand what's going on, what people are doing. Yeah, just keep yourself fresh.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I do appreciate it.
That's today's Tech Report. Back to you, Esther.
Thank you, Paul, for that technology report. And thank you, viewers, for joining us today. See you right back here tomorrow.